Are you seriously fired up about growing as a leader in business or church-based ministry? Are you feeling somewhat frustrated about not having realized your full potential in what you've been called to do? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in an increased sense of clarity, direction, and purpose, dramatically increasing the results you achieve. If you're ready to step up, contact Errol to book a free, no obligation, introductory coaching session and see whether Errol is the right coach for you. Errol takes the lessons learned from his own leadership journey and from his extensive research to help leaders and entrepreneurs to step into their biggest challenges and rise to their next level. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
Hello and welcome again to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, and our very special guest today is Danielle Strickland. Danielle serves in the Salvation Army as an officer currently based in Toronto, Canada. Danielle loves Jesus and she loves people. Her aggressive compassion has loved people firsthand in countries all over the world where she's embraced, served, cared, evangelized, taught, and exhorted individuals and crowds to surrender to the boundless love of Jesus. She loves the more fragile in communities around the world, and over the years that has led her to back alleys and late night streets to partner with Jesus in rescuing those caught up in drugs and homelessness, prostitution and despair. It's led her to the halls of government and corridors of commercial power to see laws changed and practices transformed so that people aren't trafficked and children aren't enslaved. Danielle's written several books. I'll list them for you. Just Imagine the Social Justice Agenda, Challenging Evil, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Radical Justice, The Liberating Truth, How Jesus Empowers Women, A Beautiful Mess, How God Recreates Our Lives, Boundless, Living Life in Overflow, and The Ultimate Exodus, Finding Freedom from What Enslaves You. Danielle, I know I could say so much more about you. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, you're welcome. It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. Danielle, before we go to our interview, please give us a glimpse into what you're up to in the world right now.
Yeah, what I'm up to in the world right now, I have a lot of different projects I'm really excited about. One probably highlight for me right now is to be involved in a thing called the Brave campaign, which is a campaign that we launched out of America, and it's mobilizing churches to really reach vulnerable girls before they're trafficked. So we had this audacious idea that if traffickers could target vulnerable girls, why couldn't the church? Why couldn't Redeemers? And we know who they are. We came across a study about 70 to 80% of domestic sex trafficking victims in America come from the foster care system. So we were like, wow, we know where they are. We know who they are. What if the church said, hey, we see you, we believe in you, and we're with you. You're not alone. Wouldn't that make a difference in the world? And so we've seen that kick off, and it's been one of the most exciting, hope-filled adventures this last year of my life, for sure.
Really practical. Just while we're on the topic, I guess, what if someone listening right now wants to get involved in that project? How can they jump on that?
Yeah, the best way, because we're just in this we've done this pilot phase and now we're launching actually Brave as a nonprofit. So to go on Facebook, the Brave campaign, the website's just under construction, but go check out the Facebook page and give them your email and they'll get back to you and give you all the relevant details as they emerge. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Danielle, tell us the story about how you started out in this ministry and how you knew that this was the right thing that God wanted you to do.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I'm not much of a Thunderbolt fan. Lots of people think they have these moments where there's this ta-da, kind of the heavens part, and it's thus saith the Lord. For me, it was a little more accidental. I got saved powerfully. I was a juvenile delinquent. I was always a leader, a natural leader, just not always in the right direction. So I usually led Yeah, I usually led people in the wrong direction and ended up, leading them all the way to jail and all this kind of stuff. And I had this powerful encounter with Jesus in jail that turned my perspective around. And I saw that God was for me, not against me. And I got out of a drug treatment center and was working off my probation. And I asked special permission to go on this mission trip to Africa. And I went on this mission trip to Africa, really just kind of naturally born, a little bit adventurous, curious about the world. My eyes were awake now that the world was bigger than me. And I went on this trip for a couple months, building an orphanage in this African village in Malawi. And one of the assignments, I was with this organization that was really quite strict, and they made you do these things. And I wasn't naturally good at following rules, so it was a stretch for me. But one day I had to do it or I wouldn't get my free time. So I found this girl. The assignment was I had to find somebody in the crowd. I had to tell them about Jesus, and I had to use this little tract, this little booklet. And so I did it, and I did it really badly. Like, I call it the world's worst gospel presentation because I was so, sarcastic, and I didn't want to do it. And I was, so I literally was like, God loves you, sweet, flip the page, you're in trouble because of your sin, bummer, Jesus died, sweet. And then, would you like to follow him? And I remember Fatima, this girl that I said, hey, would you mind? And she said, yeah, I really would like to follow him. And I remember saying to myself, like, oh, I don't think she heard it right. So I went over it again, and this time, instead of just reading the titles, I read the paragraphs underneath. And we got to the end, and I said, would you like to follow Jesus? And she said, yeah, I really would like to follow Jesus, and I said, I don't think you got it. So I went back to the beginning. I did it again. And this time I read like all the fine print, and I even acted out one of the diagrams in case there was, a language barrier. And ultimately, I just couldn't believe that she wanted to follow Jesus. And I remember the next day I was praying about it, and I remember just crying, just like starting to bawl, because what I realized was actually something that would forever change my life. I always knew that God could save people because he saved me. I always understood that he's powerful and he's great and he's able. What I didn't realize was that God could use me to save people. When I realized that I could be like a vehicle, like a conduit, like I could be a way that God could use for people to encounter him and be changed by him and like be invited by him, I literally was like, okay, how do I make that what I do with the rest of my life? And so for me, the Salvation Army was what I knew. I grew up in the Salvation Army, and I knew how to do that way. So that's what I did. I didn't have this like, you will serve in the Salvation Army moment. I just had this, I have got to make my life about helping people find God.
How young were you then?
I was 18.
Okay. And before that, what were you doing?
I was a juvenile delinquent. I was using drugs and stealing cars and getting in and out of jail.
And so was there, I wanted to ask about like a turning point moment or like a significant kind of epiphany you had, but it sounds like that was one for you right there.
Yeah, that was the first, of many. But that was the first of really realizing that God could use me to save people, to help people, to do something meaningful. And I feel like that's what rescued me even. I think sometimes even the people encounter God and still think that the encountering of God is about them. And that's an interesting idea. It is about them at first, but I believe that what God calls people to is to find who they really are, to use who they are to influence and to help other people. So I feel like, lots of people are stuck in kind of what I would say like 50% of Christianity, where they hear this message that God loves them and he's for them and he can help them, which is true. But actually, that's just half the story. The story is that God is much bigger than you, actually. And so even though he can help you and he wants to, it's not about you. It's about releasing you for other people. And when you get that, that's, I think, when your gift meets the world's need, that becomes exponentially impactful.
How does that get activated in someone? Someone listening maybe is... Maybe they're in the consuming phase, right? They're consuming and they're saying, God, you're awesome. They love the Lord. But they're not yet outworking their faith, shall we say.
Yeah. I think and this is where it gets tricky because if there was a theory, we would be doing it. We're
Yeah.
theorists, we're specialists when it comes to theory.
Mm.
The thing about this phase is it's practice based,
Mm.
it's action based. So, what I say to people is just go. Like, go volunteer somewhere. Like, get
Yeah.
outside of yourself. Like, go help somebody. You don't even have to be that good at it. You don't
Yeah.
even have to know what you're doing. Just begin to activate. And usually, the best way to start this is whatever you're already good at, like whatever you've been given lots of, whatever you're naturally good at, find a way to use what you're naturally good at for somebody else. And when you start to do that, that's when things start shifting and enlarging and expanding, and you start realizing, whoa, this is way bigger than me.
So was that the second kind of turning point for you? Was it, or was there another one where maybe you were heading in one direction, even in ministry or leadership, and something happened, a situation happened that caused you to go in a different direction altogether?
Yeah, I was fairly, when my husband and I got married, and my husband and I went to a small town and we started growing a church, and we were really crazy. Like, we're both type A, fast paced, like get her done, be successful, that kind of people. And competitive edge, like next best thing. And so we grew this little church into this thriving church. Like it was a fast growing movement, and it was very successful. I mean, we would say like, hey, that's what a successful people would come in and say, how did you do this? They're writing about us in some books, blah blah blah. But ultimately, I wasn't satisfied. I really felt like this wasn't it because although we had all the right numbers and we had on paper what looked like a successful church, I didn't think it was that transformative. And I didn't think that we were really loving each other. I didn't think we had relationships that were beyond surface level. I didn't think we were actually living kind of what I felt was like an Acts church calling, where we were sharing naturally, where we were extending our lives, where we were hospitable to the poor, stuff that really mattered. And so I had this opportunity that really God or opportunity to move into this Canada's poorest postal code. It's this drug addicted community with my husband and our newborn son. And I call that kind of like an unlearning season of my life, where all of the things I had learned about upward mobility and successful practices and achievement and competition, and like I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn from the poor what it meant to actually be dependent, and what it meant to be broken, and what it meant to be totally in reliance on God, and what it meant to be forsaken, and what it meant to be forgotten. And I just had to unlearn all those things I had learned, because I think what God wanted to do was he wanted to teach me another way. And this way was a different way. It was like an upside down way. It was
Right way, wrong way, good way, bad way.
I don't think it was any of those things. Like, I honestly think there are so many. I think that Jesus, he calls himself the way. So I think whenever Jesus is central, you're on the way. Don't worry about it. There's no right way, wrong way to do Jesus. If Jesus is central, you just continue on doing Jesus and he'll lead you. So I think in my own ministry, I've discovered a lot of ways, to keep Jesus center. So like whatever season I'm in, sometimes it's another way. And that's okay. I remember there's a good friend of mine, Bob Goff, and he talks about, he does this whole presentation on Bob Goff number 1, and Bob number 2, and Bob number 3, and Bob number 4. And he just talks of the progression of his life and how God has been leading him in these new versions of himself so that he can keep discovering who God is, and he keeps deepening his journey and widening his impact, but really because it's this season of newness all the time. And I really resonate with that in my life. I really, like, as he was saying it, I was like, that's exactly because oftentimes what we think is there is the way or the right way, which is the only way. And if you deviate from that, it's like you do that and that's all you can do for the rest of your life. And actually, I think that to follow Jesus, Jesus is the author, the scripture says, of creation. He's the author of creativity. And so he is constantly creating. And he's creating, and he's given us gifts that are creative as well. So it's like, how do I take everything I am right now and use it, to follow Jesus well and to help other people encounter Jesus? And so that season of my life was probably a real turning point too, where I went from this, version of success, but just Christianize it, So this is like the labyrinth, like, this is the stairway to success, and I'm going to just add Jesus to the stairway of success, to this kind of like basement of like an upside down world, and discovering God in places I thought he wasn't. Like, if you would have went to that neighborhood, I would have been like, God's not in this neighborhood. And what I discovered as I stepped into that neighborhood was that God was all over that neighborhood. But he was, Mother Teresa calls it the distressing disguise of God in the poor. He was disguised. And so if you were on an upward mobility track, you couldn't see him for trying. But if you were on that, let's discover who Jesus is track, and really as a learner and looking for the kingdom, you would see him everywhere. And then you would learn from him as well. So that was, I wrote a book around that time called A Beautiful Mess, which was about how God creates in ways that are different than how we do. It was a good discovery for me.
And what's been your biggest challenge in your leadership journey so far?
I think the biggest challenge for me consistently, and probably going forward, is letting go of the way I saw it happening. So this is that trajectory. All of us have this like trajectory of how it's supposed to go. And one of the greatest obstacles for it going the way God wants it to go is for us to let go of that plan we had and to let God take over what the plan should be. So that letting go, lots of people are challenged by becoming more committed. I'm really challenged by becoming more surrendered, and constantly saying, less of what I thought, less of what I want even, and
what
more
did you have
of what
to let
God.
go of?
I think I had to let go of success. I had to let go of what people thought of when they thought successful. I had to let go of what I thought of. I think I had to let go a bit of my reputation, and what that meant for me. I had to let go of measuring my worth and value on outcomes rather than relationships. I had to let go of some preconceptions about God. I really had these like weird preconceptions I read in this book about order, and how it's sort of this rigid system instead of this fluid beauty. So I had to let go of some ideals of what I thought God was like from my childhood, where he was like a taskmaster that I was trying to please, instead of a friend or a father or a lover that I was just trying to love. There was just, I could be here all day listing things I've had to keep on letting go of. Becoming a self-sufficiency. I can't stop letting go of self-sufficiency. Every day I let go of it a little bit more, I think.
What was the lesson you learned in all of that letting go?
Yeah, it's that God is trustworthy. It's that God is trustworthy, and that his plans are better than what I could have conceived of. So I couldn't have made them happen on my best days. Certainly not the way they happen. No one can design that. That's God's work, and that I could trust him with my life, and that even if all that was just to have a relationship with him, if that's all the plan is, which it may well be, that's okay. That's enough. That's actually enough. It's more than enough for me, and kind of to like believe him, to trust him, to live a life that's led by him instead of a life I'm leading that I say, hey, you want to come with me? The opposite of that, to fit my plans into his trajectory and go there. That's a learning curve I don't get off. Yeah.
That's great. And did your husband travel with you, or did make the transition with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have different personality types, so structures and systems are a little bit more his thing. He's more of a numbers guy, very disciplined. I'm a little bit less disciplined and a little bit more creative. And I've got a case of ADD. So the way we encounter God changes, but definitely we're both growing in our abilities to let go of what we thought it would look like, and embrace what it does look like, and the beauty of the now and the journey that we're on with God.
So, I've done over 100 of these interviews now, and what we've found is that there are 5 core abilities that leaders like yourself exhibit. And I wrote a book about it called The 5 Core Abilities of Highly Effective Leaders. The next section is about that, really. And the first question in this section is about your vision. And we recognize that highly effective leaders are able to create and communicate vision really well.
Yeah.
How have you gone about creating and communicating your vision for your ministry? And what's your process around
Well, I'm a talker. And I mean, that's a big part of what I do is go around the world speaking to people. So I think that one of the key ways that I do vision is I talk about it. I talk about it a lot. I talk about it. And what I talk about is not necessarily what we're doing now, but what we're seeking to do and what's coming, and I'm pretty good at that, pretty good at casting this vision of the reality that it is coming. It's not yet here, but it's coming, and that's actually what we're seeking to do together. So those usually are big picture for me, like big picture, like transformation on a city level. So if I'm leading a local church, well, my last local church I led was in Edmonton. I would not even just be talking about transforming the city, but I'd be talking about transforming the nation. Like, how does this church move into a transformational? Yeah. And then also I would paint a picture of a community that felt loved and paint a picture. So I was the pastor in a church that was on the strip where women were for sale and sexual exploitation was rampant. So we would talk a lot about a day where, women were valued, where there was no signs of sexual exploitation because it had been erased. And what that would look like, and then how we could fit our church in as part of that transforming process.
Love it.
Talking is kind of how I do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Great. Second question is about finance. To recognize that highly effective leaders are able to create and manage wealth effectively. How do you go about generating revenue in your business? How did you make your first dollar in your business / ministry?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is money, because of the way my life has worked in the Salvation Army, is you don't make any money. You're actually not allowed to make any money. So money's never been a big motivator for me. But I'll tell you about how I generated money from mission. And this has to do with vision. And it also has to do with creating opportunities for people to get on board with your vision.
Right. So
this is a little bit different than, so going to people saying, I really need your money. My approach, this is the vision, and this is an opportunity for you to be part of the vision. And one of the gifts that you have to bring to the vision is money. And to put it in its right place. I think money has to be put in its right place. It's a tool alongside a lot of other tools. And as soon as it gets in the driver's seat, I feel like everything goes a little bit wrong. As soon as money becomes a driver, I think money needs to be in the car, but it needs to be put in the back seat maybe. As it's just one of the things that you need to get your vision. It's not the thing.
Right.
And I think our world is so dominated by wealth and the pursuit of it that the values of the kingdom are always be challenging those dominant values of the world. So I feel like effective ministries that are missional will always not have wealth as a driver. But I will say this: the mission, if you can get to it, even if you don't have any cash, even if you don't have any money, if you can get to it anyway, the money will follow the mission, and that'll be a provision exercise where you'll learn to trust God with provision rather than money driving the mission.
Wonderful. And the next question is around productivity. What's your number one activity or process? We recognize that highly effective leaders, again, they're able to focus on the key things and eliminate or delegate the rest, right? So how have you become effective in maximizing your time and productivity? Are there any apps or processes that you use?
Yeah, I still, I'm a tiny bit old-fashioned in this way. I still use lists.
Okay.
And I use a yearly kind of review system, and I still try to schedule my priorities first. That was a little lesson I learned 23 years ago, is to put, the things that you wanted to prioritize for the year, I put them in my calendar first. And then when, what we would call the tyranny of the urgent comes relentlessly pursuing my calendar, my time, it's already blocked off. So when I say I don't have time for that meeting on that day, in my own mind, I'll be like, I really do have time, because I just prioritize those. But then I'll say to myself, no, those are your priorities. So otherwise, you're really led around by other people's agendas and other people's needs. So I would say if you have like a core, 3 to 5 priorities that you want to fit in every week, put them in first. And once you have those in there, then your calendar becomes open to fit in everybody else.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the next question is around team, and it's the ability to get the best out of the people you lead. Sometimes, whether they like you or not, still being able to get the best out of them. When it comes to building a team for you, like what's your process, and how have you done that successfully? Maybe how's it not worked in the past as well?
Yeah, I think way back when I first started, I used to have a rule that people had to love God, people had to love people. And then there were 3 things if I was going to hire you or you're going to be part of any team, no matter what the job was. You had to love God, you had to love people, and then you had to get something done. You had to have this ability to get something done. Because what I found is that, especially in ministry, people hire people because they love God and love people. Like, they're really good people. Mm-hmm. They just can't get anything actually done. So I was like, and that's fine too if you just need people to love people. Like, if it's maybe just pastoral, but even pastorally, you need people who can actually create a system of pastoral care, not just care for people. You know what I mean? So I just found that those 3 things were really helpful to me as a rule. So you had to love God. It had to be evident in your life that you were passionate about God because of the work that I did. 2, you had to love people. They couldn't be functional. They had to be people to you. And that's obviously evident in your relationships and the way you interact with other people. And then 3, you had to get some stuff done.
Has it ever not worked out? Has it ever been?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. They used to call me the hatchet because they used to fire people so quickly. Because I find that when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, I feel like that long, slow Band-Aid idea that if we just rip this off slowly, it just kills momentum and it kills team and it kills everybody else's sense of value. Because they think if you're putting up with that kind of dysfunction, then maybe they're not as good as, So I feel like it's just good to do it. If it doesn't fit, call it quicker, and it's better for everybody. But what I have found, though, is that if you can find people's gifts and release them, like, I feel like the more we can talk to one another and say, this doesn't have to be you at your expense. Like, this job shouldn't be at your expense. This job should be something that enlarges your capacity, that allows you to dream, that challenges you to do what you didn't think was possible. And so I found, as a team leader, if I can gather people and have conversations with them where I capture what it is that they want to grow in, the areas they want to be challenged in, those places they really want to develop, and I pay a little bit of attention to them, their flourishing allows everything to flourish. And that's just really I feel like that's just about intentionality of really getting to know people, but looking at them not for what you can get from them, but for how they can become better human beings. And sometimes that has actually even resulted in me saying to somebody, this job I hired you to do, it's too small for you. Like, I think you need to go to a bigger job, and like releasing people to go to a bigger job that I couldn't give them, but somebody else could. And what I've found is, as you begin to develop those type of people and those type of relationships, like those jobs that those people grow into, they become these like centers of interchange. Like they're looking to how they can bless you because you've blessed them. And it becomes this like interchange of blessing, which is really beautiful, because what used to maybe be a competitive job now becomes a complementarian job. And they're looking for ways, even in their new job, that they can bless what it is that they used to do with you, and vice versa. Plus, they have a really great friend that they love who's super gifted, that they say, you've got to take this job because you have to work with this person. So I feel like if people know that when they come to you, you're for them,
Yeah.
And yes, you have some stuff to do together, absolutely. And there's bottom lines and you got to get them done. But at the end of the day, I'm more interested in you flourishing than anything else, actually. And people like need that. And also they love it. And what happens in those environments is that your people become impossible to poach.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I
'Cause you've
feel like
invested,
you
right?
should move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, those people, like I've had tons of people like they're working for me for like peanuts in the hood. I mean, it's the worst job in the world. And people will come along saying, here's healthcare, here's this, here's that, like here's, 80 grand and a nice house. And they're just like, no, thanks. Because one, they're captured by the vision. Two, they're living this mission. And three, they understand that we're with each other in this thing, like we're for each
Right.
other. And that's a beautiful thing when you can create that.
Awesome. And the next piece is around confidence and the imposter syndrome. Effectively they're able to overcome that really, and defy self-doubt and still step out and do stuff. What's been key to you as a female leader as well? I know you've written about it in one of your books. What's been the key to you building your confidence and not getting stuck in the trap of the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think a number one for that is time with God. And not just time with God as in like I should put time in with God, but time with God, where I'm not only talking to God, but God's talking to me. And I find if I can get my value and worth from being with God, then everything else loosens. So one of the great drivers of the imposter system is what other people think of me. And if I've already heard that I'm valuable and loved and good and gifted from the Creator, all of those other things sting a lot less because they really just, in proportion to what I've just heard from God, they don't matter as much. So that's a real key time with me. I think too, here's another thing, just time with my kids. And this is a fascinating thing because, of course, that's where the tension is. But when I just hang out with my kids and have some fun together and I'm unconditionally loved by them, which is what kids do, isn't it? They don't care what you do. They care that you're with them. And when I spend time with them, something nourishes my soul. Like it's nourishing to me so that, again, I flip the switch from functional to relational. And I get back to what really, really matters, that I'm loved and that I can love, that those are kind of some of the key things. And then the other thing I say is I get rid of, I just get rid of thinking too much about it. I think leaders tend to overanalyze. And I've been with a lot of people. Maybe some people thrive in the debrief and the, over analysis stage of what's happening and who says so and what this. And I really honestly just don't care that much. It's not that I don't want to get better. I'm going to care about constructive criticism and all those sorts of things. And maybe there's some stuff I could have done better. And even recently I've apologized for a few things that happened and went, that I didn't think I did the best. But I'm not going to stay there for long.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to let's not turn it over and over and over again. Because I think we have an insatiable appetite for self-deprecation. It's not healthy.
Awesome. All right. So quick fire round.
Okay.
What does the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
Yeah, so this is a bit tricky because some days I'm at home and a lot of days I'm not. So the days where I'm at home, it looks like my kids coming into my bed and hopping in, and we hang out for a little bit just there, and we talk about whether there were dreams and what's on for the day and, various things like that. And we pray for each other a bit and have some fun, and we go down, I make some breakfast, and then I will make their lunches and I walk them to school. And then once they're in school, I listen to a 30-minute guided prayer podcast, or I read my portion of the Bible and I spend some time in prayer. And I go for a run. Those happen sometimes in that order, sometimes not. I've been stopping. I just moved to this new neighborhood and I've been discovering some new trails. And I have this one that's become a favorite where it's the end of the trails right across the street from this old, beautiful Catholic church. So I've been going in after my run and sitting in the back and interceding there for friends and people that are struggling. And that's been a beautiful addition to my time with God. I find outside and intentional prayer times to be key for my day, being meaningful.
Beautiful. And have there been any other key habits that have contributed towards your success?
Yeah, I started practicing this thing I call a way of life called Infinitum or Infinitum. It's Latin. It's a Latin word for boundless. Infinitum. The website's called infinitumlife.com if you're interested. Okay. And it basically is this system that creates a rhythm in my life. So it's about following Jesus as the main thing of my life. So not just something that I'm paid to do or something that I should do, but something I'm literally doing. And it looks like love, because the greatest commandment, Jesus said the way you do this is by loving God and by loving others. And then the three kind of what I call foundational truths that I root my life in are surrender and generosity and mission. So the rhythm of Infinitum, for me, I've been practicing it for a couple of years now, and it's been a game changer in terms of real intentional discipleship. So the posture of surrender, I do a daily prayer, and in the daily prayer, I pray that my life is not my own, it belongs to God. And I use postures to do it. It actually has I put my hands up and I just say today's too much for me and over to you, God. And then I put my hands out, I hold them tight, and I open them and I say, I want to live an open life. So freely I can receive. And then I usually stop and ask God to give me what I need for the day. And then I say, I'm going to keep these hands open. So what you give me pours out into everybody that I need. So I want to live a generous life. And then I hold my hands open like I'm hugging a stranger, like invisible, like my hands are open. And I say I want to live a missional life. And I want people that feel like they don't belong to know they can come to me, that I'm here, that I'm open to the world and the needs of the world. And I want to live a missional life. So that's a prayer. I pray that prayer every day, every morning. And then I look for opportunities to act those prayers out during the day. And then once a week, I meet with an accountability partner. We call them a hub, Infinitum hubs. And that's anywhere from 2 to 5 people that intentionally ask me about those things, about how my life following Jesus is going, how my life is surrendered. So we have a whole system based on questions. And questions keep changing. So is there a control issue for you at the moment? Or, what are the thoughts that are causing you anxiety? Have you surrendered those to the Lord? And then also for generosity, are you stingy in your life right now? Are you scared about your finances? Are you worried about not having enough? Those sorts of things. And then missionally, do you even know anybody who's a neighbor? Do you even know a name of a neighbor? Do you connect with anybody who has needs on a regular basis? Or this week, have you met anybody who you've been open to? And tell me about that experience and what it's done for you. And then we pray for each other. And once a month, we try to do a challenge together that challenges our faith a little bit. So it's been a game changer the last 2 years practicing Infinitum. It's just been so great. And that's been a real key way, for me. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a practical resource for churches as well. Is it something that churches do as well, implement?
Absolutely. Lots of churches, lots of church plants are using it but lots of churches are using it. Lots of millennials are using it. Lots of businessmen actually are using it. Because what happens is, I think we're recognizing that discipleship can't just be something I add to my life. It's not just knowledge. If knowledge was the secret to transformation, we'd all be transformed. We were like the most knowledgeable generation. I mean, we have Google, for Pete's sake. There's nothing I can't know. What's lacking is a practice. What's lacking is an actual way of practicing what we already know. So this is what Infinitum Life is meant to do, is to help you go from what you know to what you're actually living. And it's this practice. So, I mean, just like, and it's been so life-changing that way too, because I think because we know so much, we carry around a lot of guilt and shame
And we don't talk and
about what
unpack
we don't
enough, and
do.
we don't have
Yeah,
accountability enough. We're
right. And when it
isolated.
is accountability, when it is accountability, it's usually like focusing on things you didn't do
Mm.
instead of celebrating things that you're doing and ways in which you're discovering. And so just that practice alone, it's just been a life-changing
Right.
exercise. So it's free. It's a resource for anyone that might want it. If you're an emerging leader and you're thinking like, how do I go from this like great idea to like actually a practice of making Jesus, no matter what you do with your life. I know a lot of really CEO business guys have started using Infinitum, and it's been revolutionary to even how they lead at their businesses. This is just a way we've discovered, and it's just, even as a person that does ministry, it's been a game changer for me. It's been really good.
Brilliant. And what's your biggest weakness as a leader?
My biggest weakness by far is administration. I am like the most disorganized, and I'm so bad at details. Like, I'm terrible at it. So that's been, there's a great book called Now Discover Your Strengths, which is the Strengths Finder thing. And this was a help manage it. So administration and details, organize the details, that's something that I manage, usually by hiring help to do that for me.
And what's your biggest strength?
I think vision and strategy is my biggest strength.
And who have been your top 3 most significant mentors in your leadership journey so far?
Yeah, so this is a strange question because I don't think I've had any like organized mentors, but by far the 3 that came to mind would be General Eva Burrows. She used to lead the Salvation Army world. And when she retired, I lived just down the street from her in Australia for a few years, and we met once a week. And she really mentored me in a lot of beautiful leadership things. A guy by the name of Jim Nags, he works now for a group called Apricot Consulting. He's probably in vision, boldness, and authentic faith. Leadership-wise, again, he was amazing. And then there's this beautiful woman leader named Janet Munn. She was just a fantastic example of a married woman leader who put justice and prayer at the center of her life. It was really powerful.
And what was dig a bit deeper into those relationships? What was the best piece of advice you got from each one of those?
Yeah, Eva Burrows, probably her takeaway for me was making intentional time for God. And that she just hammered that. Like, you cannot do anything good for God without making intentional time for God. So she would really challenge me on that, and it was great. And then Nags, again, he would be big on time with God too, but he had this saying, which I really loved. It was really practical. He said, just be holy and show up for work. And that was I was always like, yeah, that's good, because in the end, you just got to get to it sometimes, don't you? You got to get to the business. And he was really good at just getting stuff done, and I love that. And Janet Munn, she introduced me to this phrase called words have power. And that phrase, that life and death is in the tongue. So she's someone that she speaks beautifully, prophetically, she writes, she leads. But I feel like when she speaks, when you're with her, you feel so affirmed. And everybody feels this way around her because she uses her words with power for good. And so she's incredibly affirming. And she uses this phrase, words have power. And that stuck with me. It's changed the way I speak to my husband, my kids, our home. We use that phrase now. It changed the way I did ministry. And we try to make affirmation a key.
It's beautiful. Thank you. No, we're almost done now, Danielle, right? What's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
I think the most thing I'm fired up about right now is that we are I believe that we're sort of at a threshold of a new kingdom advance. And I think something's coming. I feel like this connects with the chaos of the world. We've never really been in this kind of chaos for generations. And I feel like this chaos is connected to something God has planned. I think that we're literally on the threshold of a new thing God wants to do in the world, where every Christian begins to participate in blessing the world, in redeeming the earth. And I really feel like it's a new season that we're in, and it's accelerating. The excitement inside of me is accelerating. I'm not quite sure exactly what it means, but I think it's post-denominational. It's Jesus central. It's engagement. It's a releasing and a flourishing of people's giftings. It's a creative expression. I feel like it's going to come in ways we had not thought of before. And I believe it's going to really matter on the planet, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be liberating to everyone, every demographic, gender, race. I feel like there's just going to be this empowerment movement, and I'm really just excited to be a part of it. To tell you the truth, I feel so excited, and I wish I could tell you more clearly what it is. It's actually one of the things I'm most excited about and less clear on than I ever have been before. But I feel like whatever it is that's coming, it's going to be an unprecedented opportunity for Jesus to be known in the world. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And is there a book or a resource that you'd recommend right now for a leader or entrepreneur that's listening right now?
You know what? I contemplated the question, and I don't really have one book. I'm such an eclectic reader, and I read a lot. And there's so many amazing books out there. I was having a look through some of the ones that I've read. Always go back, if I look for a grounding, I always go back to a little book called Telling the Truth by Frederick Buechner. And it's this really beautiful piece of work about just understanding who you are, your humanness, and yet God's incredible grace. And that those two things, when they come together, are this beautiful thing, you becoming the person God made you to be. So that's the one I keep landing on. I keep going back when I'm going through seasons of like, what do? I go back to that book and I read it again, and it helps me. But there's so many good ones. I mean, yeah, that's what I got.
Danielle, thank you for such a nourishing time today. And I've been inspired and encouraged, and challenged a little bit as well, which is nice. How does someone now find out more about you? Where do they go? Do you have a website, blog, social media handles?
Yeah, DanielleStrickland.com. So that's pretty easy. Just go to the website and you'll get directed from there. I think my Twitter's DJ Strickland. And there's a few handles like that, but I'm pretty easy to find. Just Google away. Brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. Guys, go and check out DanielleStrickland.com. Also go to Amazon, type in Danielle Strickland, and you'll find her books there as well. Be blessed, be encouraged. If you're keen to step in and support the whole project around trafficking that Danielle's developing there, please do get in touch. I'm sure that just let's just see some things happen, man. Let's see God do some amazing things. I've been inspired today. Danielle, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, Errol@ErrolLawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around the leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away. We'll get you booked in. It's Errol@ErrolLawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes, give us a nice review. That would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.